Okay, so what do you have? Orderliness. Okay, orderly people are black and white thinkers. They're judgmental. If you show orderly people, imagine that you have them you describe to them some kind of crime, like maybe it's living off the fruits of prostitution. So maybe you talk to them about a pimp, and you give them a little story about the pimp, and then you say, how long should this pimp be thrown in jail? It's like the orderly people think. You just lock them up and throw away the key. They judge moral transgressions very harshly. And so that's part of the aspect that's judgmental. They're not egalitarian either. They don't think that everybody should have the same amount all the time. They're pretty interested in hierarchy and structure. And there's some real advantages to hierarchy. People think that they'd be happier in an egalitarian situation, but the problem with egalitarian situations is people are always arguing, right? Because no one's right in an egalitarian situation. Everybody gets to have their opinion, and it's like, when are we going to stop with all the opinions and do something? And the thing about a hierarchy is, the advantage to a hierarchy is there are things you are responsible for, but there's also things you're not responsible for. And that's a big advantage. And then you also know who is responsible for those things. So it looks like people are more comfortable in hierarchies than they think, even if they're liberals. So that's kind of interesting too. So anyways, all those things seem to chunk together. Now the industrious people also seem to want to climb up the hierarchy, right? Because you know that industrious people become more successful as they move through life. And so you think, well, that's sort of a motivation. But then you might ask, is the industrious person trying to get to the top, or is the industrious person trying to get the hell away from the bottom? And my suspicions are that the industrious person is trying like hell to get away from the bottom. They don't want to be down there with the, like I said, the unemployed and the great unwashed. And now why? Well, here's a bunch of reasons. First of all, we know pretty clearly that if you're in a dominance hierarchy, the closer you are to the bottom of the hierarchy, the more likely you are to die. So, and that's independent of absolute income. Like, obviously, if you're poor enough, that's going to make a difference because you're going to starve to death. But assuming you have enough money to take care of your basic needs, then dominance hierarchy position is a big determinant of mortality, even in heart disease and more. If you look at songbirds or any other kind of animal that lives in the dominance hierarchy, and that's pretty much the case for all animals. So imagine you have a dominance hierarchy of songbirds in your neighborhood. And the high dominant songbirds, so they're maybe the industrious songbirds, they get the best nest. And then you think, well, what does the best nest mean? Well, it's close to nesting material, so they don't have to exert a lot of energy building the nest. And it's dry when it rains, so that's a good thing, because then their eggs don't get wet and get cold. And there aren't a lot of predators lurking around, and it's well hidden, and it's well ventilated. Like, there's a bunch of things that make an optimal nesting site really useful. So there's a bunch of birds, and some of them have great nesting sites, and some of them have, slum nesting sites, and then some kind of epidemic comes through. Guess what happens? The birds die from the bottom of the hierarchy upwards. Well, why? Well, because the ones at the bottom are chronically stressed. And stress shuts off your immune system. And so it's like, poof, epidemic comes through, dead. And so one of the things that may well have been built into human beings as the biological basis of industriousness is the desire to get the hell away from the bottom of a dominance hierarchy as fast as possible. Because you're much more likely to die if you're down there. And we know that your trait preferences have emerged as a consequence of evolutionary pressure. And if the bottom of the dominance hierarchy happens to be the place where disease is rife, which is exactly how it is, then of course you should be motivated to get the hell out of there. And so I think a lot of the class distinctions that people draw and their desire to have markers of status and so on are a reflection of their high motivation to be associated with the high levels of the economic classes.